you guys? I don't think my mic is working. Oh, here we go. I hope you guys are all having a great time at Unite. It's been a crazy couple of days for me. I've definitely met some amazing people and heard some awesome stories. And for those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Natalie, and I lead the partner management team at Shopify. And I'm here today to lead an amazing conversation covering themes on project management and building client trust. As a Shopify partner, project management is likely already one of your many, many responsibilities. And I'm honored to be up here today to talk about a subject that is so important to many of your businesses. Regardless of your current approach, my ask today is that you be open-minded to the things that we're going to discuss and to the different ways that you can grow or adapt your project management style. And in a few minutes, I'll introduce an amazing panel of Shopify partners who will share their own experiences and advice for managing successful projects. And of course, we will be opening up to a live Q&A for the last 15 minutes today, so please definitely go through the Unite app. And in the QA module, you can enter the code UNITE, and under track 2, submit your questions. I'll do my best to get through as many of them with the panel today. All right. I think every project manager in this room will agree when I say the most difficult part of a project is managing its constraints. The final quality or outcome of all projects is constrained by its timeline, its budget, and scope. And since these are all connected, it's critical that you understand your client's #1 priority in order to mitigate risks to the other two. One of the largest and most impactful projects that I've ever managed was a few years back when I was working as a broadcast producer for a large advertising agency here in Toronto. Our client came to us and asked us to help them create an awareness campaign that would help differentiate them from a leading competitor. The brief was to produce enough content to create an online video library that would feature products on their website. And the goal, of course, was to do this better than what their competitor was doing. I knew my first step as project manager and producer was to understand the client's #1 priority. Was it high-quality videos, timeline to get these videos posted online, or budget to actually produce them? And following a pretty thorough discovery phase, we uncovered that budget was an absolute deal breaker for this client. So we knew going into things that we had to keep costs low no matter what. And what I've learned, having this conversation with the client in those planning phases was absolutely critical. It definitely set the tone for the project moving forward. And what I've learned is that it is really all about managing these expectations in the upfront and being able to adapt to changes as they happen. Because as we all know, there really is no such thing as a perfect project. Once we'd aligned on the top priorities and objectives for that video series, our approach was to be scrappy without sacrificing too much in the way of quality. We built a small, dedicated project team. We leveraged client resources where we could in order to keep those production costs down. We grouped content ideas into themes so that we could tackle multiple videos in single shoots and create efficiencies with editing. And we launched completed videos on the website in batches in order to satisfy some of those original timeline pressures. But most importantly, we made every decision with our main client in the room. She truly became an extension of our team, and she helped us navigate things like quick turnaround on creative feedback and consistent communication with stakeholders. And she even introduced us to key players on her side to help us keep this project moving forward. I made a point to be transparent with her as well, dealing with production issues head-on when they inevitably popped up. And since we had already established such a great foundation of trust in our relationship, it was much easier to have a more direct and immediate conversation with her when things went wrong. And this came in especially handy when dealing with challenges that threatened our budget, since we knew that was our #1 constraint going in. The key point here is to never assume that clients understand the nature of your work. And giving them insight into things like your decision-making process and your approaches is really only going to help build that trust. Of course, not everything was a smooth success, And as with most projects, there were definitely areas of this one that should have been more formally documented so that we could refer to things at different stages. And in other words, so we could cover our ass. It was definitely an area of this project that we could have done better. But as they say, hindsight is 20/20. And in the end, our small but mighty team produced and launched 102 videos in just over 6 months. And this was obviously a huge win for our client, for our project team, and for me personally. And it's often the project I reflect on when I feel like I'm faced with the impossible. Understanding how project management is going to work for you, for your clients, and for your business is going to be an ever-evolving learning process. And I'm very excited to get into some of those details today with our panelists. I really want to get their perspectives on things like building great relationships, anticipating needs, and managing expectations. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Bodog, and Axel to the stage, our panel for today. Hey guys. Hi. Thank you very much for being here today. Before we get right into some of these questions, I'd love if you guys could each just provide a little bit more detail on what you do and the businesses that you're here representing today. If you want to go first.
I'm Pham, and I am Chief Designer and Co-founder at Cleverific, and we do agency work as well as app development, mainly on the Shopify platform.
Happy birthday.
Yes, it's his birthday today.
Sorry. Woo! Thanks.
So my name's Bo. I run a creative agency in Sydney, Australia called Createur, and we've been running for 7 years, and we built the 1,200th Shopify store was our first project, so we've been around for a while.
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Axel from France. Sorry for the accent. And I'm the co-founder of Maestrooo, which is a leading plus agency in France. And before that, I was running my own e-commerce store, selling sneakers to collectors.
Great, thank you. So we're just going to get right into it. The first question I wanted to ask was directed at all of you, actually. I'd love to hear from each of you if you have different approaches to project management or methodologies that you've used in your studios and agencies. You can go first.
I was thinking about this question a lot, and for me, what I wanted to convey was it definitely looks different depending on the size of the team, right? So no one process is going to work for everyone. And so what I wanted to really think about was what ties all these together. And the most important thing is clear communication. And how the biggest thing that you can get, or the biggest way to get clear communication is to remove ambiguity from the way that you scope or the way that you onboard or the way that you communicate with other members of your team. So what happens is if you remove ambiguity, then you remove cycles of communication, which saves time and then saves everyone a lot of effort. So I just wanted to kind of bring that particular piece to project management.
So when you say remove the ambiguity, are you referencing you would actually approach a project with a client and come to the table right away in an onboarding process and let them know how you're going to approach things in different phases?
Well, it starts from internal, right? So are all the questions that you're asking a client, do they make sense? Right? Are you getting the right information from the get-go, right? And can you communicate this well with your team? So the onboarding process for us is really kind of analyzing how we approach each client too, because the one client can say yes and another client can say yes, and they can mean two totally different things. So can you ask the right questions to get the right answers for yourself, right?
Yeah, so for us it starts at the sales process, really. That's your first step towards understanding the psychology of the client and what they're after, and asking the right questions really early in the piece before you're even scoping the project or before you're even actually in the job. You want to make sure that you understand what the outcomes are, who the stakeholders are, who are you actually building for. And by asking the right questions right up front, you'll get a lot of those answers before you even have to dive in. So you're not going to find those challenges as you work, because if you leave it till too late, then you start the friction, you start the nervousness. And I feel like the project management, the actual work of the project management is the easy part. If you've got an efficient team, if you've got standards and processes and they're well documented, that it actually that part is the easy part. Anyone can do that bit. It's client psychology management that I think is actually, that's what project management is really. It's expectation management. It's fear management. It's people have, and oftentimes you'll get someone who's spending very few people spend. That they're like, oh, I could really spare this money, right? Like all of them are going, well, I'm making an investment to make more money in the future. So most of them are spending a decent amount of cash. So yeah, you really want to make sure that you're giving them the comfort that that's going to be well spent with you.
I think it's quite the same from us. I think psychology is one main point, as Bodog said. After all, I think management is more like the 80-20 rule. The 80% of the time you make the same thing and 20% it's different. So how do you automate the 80% in the most possible way so you can eliminate all unnecessary tasks from your schedule and your task? I think that's mainly this. And there is also a question of project management it's two things at the same time. It's like internal project management and external project management. I think we will discover it in the next question, sorry. But I think we speak internal project management. It's more like, for me, it's more like hiring a team and training them to explain them how to make the best work possible and not treating them as employees, but more like team players, to how to leverage them to produce the best work possible without needing to manage them. I think that's the main question for me.
So just to further on that, how much time Axel, would you dedicate to actually working with a client in those beginning stages and building up their understanding of your process?
You mean at the beginning when we discover them?
Yeah.
We have a different agency. We are not looking for clients. It's more clients who come to us, as we have beginning with Shopify making themes and apps, and then clients. So it's more like we've seen your themes. We know you're able to make it happen, so we choose you because of this. It's not like you are in front of 12 competitors and you need to put trust in what you do. It's very different. But I think to run a good project, you need to at least meet up with the client 4, 5, 6 hours to eliminate all superficial details and concentrate on the main points. We always write kind of specification on Google Drive, and we make them approve the specifications before starting anything. And the quotation is based on the exact specification. I mean, if you want something different, it will be different also. We adjust it based on what they want.
You mentioned putting together a document in Google Drive and then having them sign off on it. I'm just curious from maybe Bo, are there any tools or specific tools that you use internally for project management as well as externally with a client?
Yeah, so the first tool we use is Google Docs. Same thing. We have a template that actually, and it keeps growing every time we run into a gotcha or a problem, and we've been doing it for a while. So now we feel like we've got this enormous document that we do it by subtraction, right? We cover everything that they want, and that's sort of a certain size of project, and we whittle that down to in a reductive way to say, okay, when do we reach your budget? When do we get to a point where you've got all the things that you like? Because that sets expectations early to say that you can't squeeze the budget and get the same thing. You have to remove something to get something for less. So that's the first step, and then what we do is we extract, once they sign that off, we extract that into Trello. We use Trello as a tool, and all the items are itemized. And then that kind of creates the framework to start off from, and they can see right in front of them what they've talked about and what they've approved. It's really hard you can't now verbalize something new. You can't you can't assume something and say that something's different because it's right there in writing. They'd have to add the card themselves, and then it becomes visible and it becomes obvious.
Do you have any tools that you use specifically that you found successful?
I actually use the exact same set of tools. So Google Docs and Trello has been very effective for us, and especially Trello is very versatile as well for our workflow that's always ever evolving, and it's back to like stacking what you've learned and then being able to house it in a system that is as flexible. Because I've definitely gone back to look at some boards that we've created and laughed about how terrible our process was or our workflow was. And we made internal jokes about it, but what we did come away with is that if it wasn't bad like a year ago, then we weren't really growing and we weren't getting better at what we do. So that's important to also say, hey, you know what? How quickly can I change? And is there like a piece of information that allows me to reflect and know that I've actually accomplished what I do? It's just get better at what I'm doing.
Right.
I think that's important to say just on that don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. If you're going over budget, I mean, so all of us have done it many, many times. You don't just sort of sail in and start doing it perfectly. That's so important, that process. You've got to, if you're negative about those negative experiences, you're not going to learn. Yeah.
That's a really good segue into kind of the next area of questions that I want to talk about, which is the actual scoping of projects. Bo, maybe we'll start with you. What is your approach to scoping Shopify projects?
We find that actually most of them, Axel mentioned it before, that there's sort of 70 to 80% of the project is it's good because it's like software as a service, it's standardized. Shopify has got a standard feature set that you can build on, and of course, as you get more complex, as you work with Plus a lot more and with more advanced merchants, then you have to create innovative solutions, but you've got the same baseline each time. So you've got 70% that's generally the same every time, and then we have a section that we call special features, basically. So we can say, here's every Shopify project that we ever do. You're going to get all of this regardless, because that saves those silly questions. They're not silly. They're important to the client, but for us, they're very menial sometimes. Like they say, do you do micro formats? Is it SEO? It's friendly, all that sort of stuff. It's like, of course it is, but for a client, they're really important, and they don't. Maybe they've been burnt before, right? Like they've worked with someone who may not have considered those things, and we want to show that no, that's automatic. You are going to do those things, and then when they ask for special things that aren't standard, we call them special features. So they know what we're doing that's just across the board, and then they know what we're doing also on top that's special. Yeah.
I think it really depends what you want to build. If you want to make a regular build like just homepage, collection pages, product pages, account pages, it's quite like you say, it's a list. You have the same list for every project. If you want to create something completely new, like new sharing or buying experience, discovery experience, it's where you need to dive in to find ideas to present to the client before being able to tell him, hey, it costs this amount of money to make it happen, and it has this level of interactivity or this depth of modification. I think it really depends how you want to position yourself and how much budget you have to make it happen. Because project management is good, but if they give you 20,000 or 200,000, it's not the same at the end. You have way more time to allow you to search new things which don't exist or which exist but not adapted to the market or the target, and make your build evolve over time based on what you learn over the discovery of the project. It's also a question of how much projects you make in the same field. If it's a 20th project you make for, I don't know, CPGs or regular B2C brands or selling watches or sunglasses, it's of course easier. But if you plan to jump from one field to another one, like luxury, big catalogs, very discoverable products, or targeting something very strange, it can take you a lot more time to have something which was something at the end, like which would make a big difference compared to any competitor on the market.
And I'm also wondering, when a large part of it, and I mentioned this in my kind of intro in the beginning, is to never kind of assume that the client understands your process and the nature of the work that you guys are doing. I'm wondering, too, how important is it to you to include assumptions in your scoping documents to just continue that education with the client?
We tend to put a little bit of assumption for sure into our scoping. And one of the reasons why is, I'm going to go back to what you said about client psychology, right? And are you going to be an extension of their team, or are they going to be an extension of your team? And what does that communication look like, and how much effort is that communication going to take over the length of your project really is where I think scope becomes an issue, because back to what you said, time becomes a factor. And that communication time for some people is short, quick, and they have the answers. Some other people, we found out, we thought they had the answers, but it seemed like they were the wrong person to ask, even though they seemed like they had the right answers, right? So it's taking into account who you're working with and really catering the unknowns to what you're going to have to assume a little bit, especially when you start, as to how that communication flow is. And then just be able to pivot when you realize, okay, well, you know what, this is much easier, this is much more difficult than I thought. And then on top of that, add that matrix to your team dynamic. That's the other piece of it.
Right, that's great. And then when it inevitably happens, Bo, maybe this is a good one for you, how do you address scope creep with clients?
Yes, I mean, it happens every time. You know, I don't think anyone has ever done a project where a client has let it be exactly what they agreed to, right? Like, and that doesn't mean that they have malicious intent. Like, you've got to follow Hanlon's razor, right? It doesn't mean that. Just don't always assume that there's malicious intent behind something. Sometimes it's ignorance or it's lack of education. And the way we avoid that really is by not creating the combat up front. You know, we don't call it scope creep because again that's got a negative connotation. You know, we call it feature addition at the time. Like internally we call it scope creep, but to the client we don't call it scope creep. And it's important not to say no. You know, that's like, because again people feel like they're being chastised. It's positive reinforcement. It's training. So when someone brings something like that up, we silo it. We say yes. No problem, we're just going to put that over here and let them keep going. Because you've got to keep that cadence going, you've got to keep momentum. You don't want this sort of blocker every time they come in and if they hear no too much, they feel like they're being chastised and they feel like, you know, you're parenting them, and they're already nervous. They're not technical, they don't know what you're doing. What you do is magic to them, and that increases fear. So I think it's really important to give them comfort, and you say, I agree with you, that sounds like a great idea. I'm just going to put that in this column in Trello, and that's feature requests. And we'll talk about that. You know, if you want to do it now, we'll talk about that now. And I think that sort of goes on to, you know, we'll cover that later maybe, but the idea of we have a retainer model built into the original contract, and usually they agree to it, and it's good to build that in straight away. Don't try to cover it later because they'll try to do it themselves. You say, okay, you're also setting up to retainer, and sometimes we bring that forward. So we say, okay, would you like to start eating into that retainer budget to cover the things that you've asked for now? So it creates a real positivity that they say, okay, yes, we're doing it, and we've agreed to what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's interesting, agreeing to the retainer up front. When you pitch that to clients, is that pitched as like a contingency, or is it pitched as support and maintenance after the fact?
And it's optional. We say it's optional. And we also say it's like one of those things, it's another psychological play where you say it's optional, but most clients take it. So they'll feel like the odd one's out if they don't. They'll be like, well, maybe there's something wrong about what we're doing if we don't take that. So they usually agree to it. And I didn't used to have the confidence. Again, it's learning experience. I used to think that I'd lose the pitch because they'd go, I'm going to be up for even more afterwards. What it actually gives them is comfort. You say, no, I'm going to be here for you. That's not for free, but I will be here for you. You don't have to. You can take it on your own, but then you're on your own. And they take it, and then that gives us a pool of resources to work with, so we don't extend budget. Again, that's that negativity, right? If you ask for more money at the time, they're like, they get the feeling that you're baiting and switching them. They feel like you're kind of like now, you're scope creeping, right? You're budget creeping. We build that in.
Axel, we've talked about this. I know you have a very different approach to the support contracts or the retainer contracts.
I mean, at the beginning, we don't sell retainers because we have a very different approach. It's like we want to offer something which is very customizable for the client, the merchant. We prefer to say it will cost you $200,000, and the competitors that are at half the cost. But the difference between us and them, it's like you have the project delivered and you can change anything by yourself. Like in a SIM, you can buy for $200 on the platform. So this means the client is able to change any image, any video, any text, anything, and it automatically adjusts the render on mobile, on tablet, on desktop, whatever. And it allows us to only concentrate on new builds and not being forced to sell retainers to just pay people salaries. But it's very different. Like, you need to find clients who are more locked with their actual platform. Like, majority of our clients came from .NET custom builds, which have cost them 500,000, 1 million, 2 million euro. So it's very different. They are used to be locked. And when you sell them the fact they will not be locked again, they are like, wow, how is it possible? When you make them the demo, they discover the world, unless you have not even you have not created anything. It's like how it works for everyone. But majority of them are like, wow, I didn't know it even exists into the market. And that's what helps us close the deals and make things happen. But yes, we don't want to sell retainer to make people lie.
Can I add to that? So we really think about scope as how can we make a client be successful at their project, right? And we don't do the hard retainer, but we do ask, like, we ask up front about the handoff. You know, is there a team that can facilitate this for you when the project is done? Sometimes there's an internal team. We don't have to worry about it. It doesn't really make sense to do like a major retainer. You can do a minor one for like unknowns. But that's the important part of that process is like they ask you for a project, but what they really want is for you to help them solve like a problem or they have an idea, right? And sometimes that idea looks a little bit different than what they asked you for. So I think asking that question up front, again, about whether or not you're an extension of their team or they're an extension of your team, those things play into effect early on. And it's a natural segue, right, to asking for additional funds to help someone be successful.
Right, that's a really good tip. I'm wondering, do you guys have, if you were to speak to a project manager that was just starting out today and give them one or two pieces of advice of things that you guys have learned over the years, what would that be? Axel?
Two things. Be reactive. Like, if you have something to say it now. Not yesterday, not today, now. And the other one is, what are your skills? Like, I mean, are you just it's not condescending, it's more, are you just a project manager? Do you got skills on development, design, integration, third PL, logistic, whatever? Because it can help you explain something to the client that you don't have to debrief with another one. If you spend your time asking something, hey, how does it work, to just explain it back to the client, you may just lose 2 times the necessary time needed to just make it happen. Like, you just have to know how it works and explain it in your own words, even if it's more simple than the technical explication of your developer. But I think it's a main point. Like, if you are able to shortcut everyone and say directly something, you're going to make your team win a lot of time and not losing time explaining things.
I think for us, it's balanced communication. I tell them straight away is balance that out, because it's not a zero-sum game. There's some people don't like communicating a lot, but those people are very efficient. You've got those quieter, introverted people, and they'll get a lot of work done, but then they make the client nervous. It's the salesperson's job to establish trust really early in the piece. Then it's the project manager's job to keep it. But you do need to, you can't not communicate, because if you leave them in the dark, that's when they start freaking out, and that's when they start going back up the line. And as a business owner, your job is always to try to move the business forward and not to get buried in your project. So the second that you have to get pulled back in, and that's when I know something's a little bit wrong, is when someone starts calling me and asking me, that means that they're getting nervous because they want to talk to the guy in charge, and that's what you want to sort of avoid. And so then the opposite is also a problem. Then that's where you get budget problems, is over-communication. If you over-service them instead of standard, where they feel like they can tap you anytime they like, then they stop using the procedures. So one of the important things is that right at the beginning, we create a document which is basically their documentation for the project and a shortcut to answers. And when I say to the project manager, every time you're going to email them with an answer, craft the email, but don't send it as an email. You actually put in the document and send them a link to the documentation. So you train them during that project to think of documentation as their first step, so they're not constantly leaning on that kind of like, tapping you on the shoulder all the time. Because what will happen is that if you rely on that, then they get addicted to it, and then they stop learning for themselves. and then what will happen is they'll use the time, and you spend time answering the questions, and then they'll go, oh, so where's the work? Well, I've spent the whole time talking to you, not doing the job.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you two? Any advice?
I think it's because it's always a personal relationship. One of the key points for us is empathy. When you're approaching something that's difficult, like always be able to put yourself in their shoes, and how do you soften a blow for someone and still be able to clearly get the answers that you need or the questions that you need. But one of the things that we do approach with people is make them part of the solution. So always provide like multiple ways to approach an issue, right? So that they feel like, hey, you know what? It could be a time solution. It could be a funding solution. It could be multiple solutions, but know that they have some priorities of themselves, right? Rather than like, hey, when you approach it, solve it internally. No, it's a good time to share.
So just kind of building off the whole advice sharing and the lessons learned stuff, we have time for one more question, and this one is going to be towards all of you. We've talked a lot about advice and tips, and I'm just wondering if we can reflect back on a project management horror story and what went wrong and how you pulled it back on track, if you did, and what you learned from it.
Okay, let's start. Project management horror story. Yes, it was one of the first projects we made with a very big migration. We had never done migration on Shopify before, so it was like the first. And the client gave us a task to communicate with the previous team, which was a small studio of 5 people building its own e-commerce solution internally, like the real nightmare, built in Microsoft technology. I can't even talk about an API or something. There was nothing. It was more like import, export CSVs and the nightmare. And we were supposed to handle the data migration from this platform to Shopify Plus, but without any guideline. It was like, okay, you have the other team, communicate with them, see everything with them, and once you have agreed of a way to work with them, come back to us and say, okay, we have found something, we can make it happen. But it didn't work that way, because the other team was so furious that the client leaves them, that they were trying to kill everything we tried to make. And so we were like, okay, we want to export this set of data, but we can't. And how can we hack the data to get back, etc.? So it was like finding solution to problems which were created by anyone else instead of making the work. It ends up working, but takes 3 months instead of 1. So the client pays, but whatever, it's an hour management stories, I think. That's it.
Yeah, this was a hard one because the more specific you get, the more obvious it is who it is. But it's I think this has happened more than once, and it's now sort of red flag for us. Is if you've got a point of contact, which is why I mentioned earlier. Finding out who the stakeholders are is really important to find out. Who's making the decision, ultimately who's making who's getting the approvals. And the mistake we've made before is to let someone run interference there, right? Because there will be a project manager at their side. They look after themselves, right? So if they come, there's sometimes a bit of clouding in between. And if we let them stand in between us and we don't get to talk to the people who are approving it, then at the tail end, we've had it. They've come back, and then the people who are actually making the decision go, that's not what we asked for at all. And then you say, well, I was talking to this guy, well, they say, well, they didn't have the authority, you should have asked us. So that's just a really big warning. If you don't ask and you don't know who's going to be approving this thing, find out and make sure you're talking to them.
This happened relatively recently. I realized that if a client is not saying hell yes, then it really means no. We bought into a tentative yes, and we really actually sold them on Shopify. And we did a good job because 90% of the way into the project, they changed their minds and moved to a totally different platform. And it didn't cost us anything, but it was something that we learned, like, okay, where did we miss this? And they were willing to pay for it, so it wasn't really like hard on our business per se, but it was just really how did we miss this, right? And it was always like the entire time through the project, it was a tentative yes, right? And we didn't pick up on that, and we didn't address those issues, because yes was like good enough for us.
That's huge. Yeah, we've had that before as well, where you just like they go, oh yeah, okay, you know, and you're like, yeah, totally. Yeah.
So how would you mitigate something like that, like next time around, avoiding the tentative yes?
Well, I think next time around is that you pick up on that and you have like a side conversation. Just say, hey, you know what? After the meeting or whatever else, I'm not sure that was a 100% yes from you. What are your concerns? And then address those.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the honesty. I appreciate it. We're going to open it up to the live Q&A now. So for the next 15 minutes, so if everyone wants to just submit their questions through there. Can I give you that? Okay. All right, this one is directed towards Axel. Please elaborate on how you are able to justify quoting $200K for a Shopify design and build project.
I always have this one. Like, I think it really depends on how much you sell your hourly rate first. In France, the medium amount is around 70 to 90 euro an hour. It's more in the US. Usually it's around $150 an hour. We bill 150 euro minimum by hour, and some clients even 1,000 by hour. So after all, it's quite easy to sell 200,000 build when you bill 1,000 now. It really depends what they are looking for. I mean, you can sell front-end development or design at even 300 an hour. It's a bit difficult to sell. But when they are looking for expertise like connecting to SAP or connecting to Dynamics or scaling with huge volume on logistics or those kind of things, they are ready to pay a big amount just to get the problem off the mind. Just to say, okay, this guy is the man we need. He knows exactly how it's supposed to work. I'm not going to stress test 20 people before getting the good reply. I prefer to pay him and go to the next subject. On the builds themselves, the majority of the builds we make are between 80,000 and 150,000. I think it's a good pricing for pre-sale consulting, understanding their problems, proposing good solutions, designing, front-end development, launching, sometimes in multiple languages or multiple currencies, and all the account reconciliation, like you get sales and you need to make them match with their ERP internally or their EMS like TradeGecko or the Hive or whatever they use. But after all, it's just a question of how much you sell and what price you put on your expertise. I think majority of people are pricing way less than they should. When I hear people who tell me I've paid my Shopify website 10,000, I'm like, okay, we're not the good one to speak with you. Like, find another agency because it's not the same thing at all. It's just a question of how much you want to price your own services. For me, everyone needs to price minimum 80 euro an hour. I don't know how much it costs in the US, but maybe it's 100 an hour. For me, it's a strict minimum. Like, if you want to make margin, hire people, expand the company, or invest in new things like apps, themes, or anything else, in training, in retreats. For example, you come 1 week for Unite, it costs you a lot of money, like you pay the hotel to everyone, the travel, we go 1 week after to New York, so during 2 weeks you don't work. You need to make money to offer this kind of lifestyle to people who work with you. I think it's just a question of how much you want to price your services. That's all.
Great, thanks. What are each of your thoughts on traditional project management education? Do you think you need specification or a degree in project management to succeed? Bo, maybe?
No, absolutely not. You know, all of our hires are cultural hires. That's probably going to change as we grow. So I think, you know, the first phase, you know, up to the first 12 people, we're all cultural hires. It takes a lot of energy to create that backbone, but I think that's really important you've got to create that backbone, because if you want to be proud of what you do, but also then concentrate on moving forward, you have to duplicate yourself. And you can only do that by mentoring people. And it's a very hard job. It's long hours. It's hands-on. It's per person. And you add them to the team, you give them the attention, and you make sure everyone builds up. But then by that time, you've got those people who are trained to be leaders as well. And I think that's the key, is that you provide that foundation for everyone on the team, and they then they pass that on, and that's your education system. You know, you can replace. And in fact, you know, I've been told many times by people who work for me that you know, some of them had degrees before they came in, and they were useless. They felt like they started completely from scratch when they came to us. And that told me that that's not required then, you know, that we can start people off and they can learn, and then they can teach others.
Great. Well, both Bo and Tu mentioned that you guys use Google Docs and Trello. Are they both client-facing? Do you, and how do you, separate internal PM for external PM?
For us, it's dependent on the client. Like, if we feel that they're going to actually use Trello, then we'll create a board and have them. Even if they don't use it, we'll also put one up so that they feel comfortable whenever they want to check in. And I would say that maybe 1 out of 10 will actually use it. And this also changes as our relationship with them changes, right? If you're talking about retainer and a relationship over time, then they assimilate into the way that we work, which is everything now goes into Trello.
Yeah, so we gauge that into the pricing right up front. So we ask those questions. We gauge their proficiency, and yes, in most cases, it agreed. You know, not necessarily 1 in 10, but we tend to find a majority of people won't really use those systems. They definitely won't use them as efficiently as well as we do. We assess that right up front. When we mention those systems, we gauge their reaction by saying, you know, to see, again, hell yes, we love Trello. They say that, then we know they're going to use it. If they say, what's Trello? Then that adds 20% to the price straight away. And we still use it. We use it internally, but we know that there's going to be an overhead of communication where it's going to be emailing, and then we're going to have to extract and pull into our systems, because you need those systems. You're not going to be able to do it by email. You know, that's the thing. Clients will try to squeeze you into doing things by email, because to them, it's easier to push information out. It's a lot harder to process and silo it. Often they don't feel like that's a cost. They think that's just part of doing business. That's a word I hate, part of doing business. It's all billable. You know, it's all your time, and it's not free.
We definitely have a fee for working in email, for sure. That's like the worst thing. Like, it's my personal nightmare. Yeah. So anytime I can move someone away from that, then I definitely away from email.
Scope creep is always a reality. How do you handle it, and where do you draw the line in sand?
Yeah, for us, again, we try to use terminologies that are positive. Like drawing a line in the sand puts a barrier up, it puts a wall up. We don't put walls up. We redirect, and we positively reinforce good behaviors, and we ignore bad behaviors. Obviously, never repeat this to a client, but you know, people are not unlike dogs in terms of like how they sort of intrinsically and viscerally think. That they respond to positive behaviors. They respond negatively to negative reinforcement. So what you do is you sort of, if you shut someone out a little bit, if they get a neutral reaction, that's a sort of mild way of giving them a no. You know, so I tend to kind of pull back a little bit. I freeze them out a bit where they don't get that positivity. If they do the right thing, they get a real kind of like energy reaction where I'm like, that's great, let's do this. This is really nice, and they feed off my energy as a result. So that's kind of how I handle those things, is that when they start behaving badly, we just kind of truck along and we deliver, but they don't get the energy from us that they expect. So that's the easiest way to manage it, is by not letting them know that you're managing it, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, there's a good follow-up question in here too. How do you deal with clients that resist change and do not understand the out-of-scope tasks?
Should I answer that as well?
Sure.
So they resist change and they don't. Yeah, and then what was the second part of it? Sorry.
Resist change and do not understand out-of-scope tasks.
Well, I mean, there's kind of like, we don't really allow that. You know, if they're that they have to understand at the end of the day. There's not sort of we're pretty intolerant of that, but not in a negative shutout way. But we don't just kind of let them get away with it. You can't let them steamroll you with feigned. And to be honest, it's a lot of the time it's feigned ignorance, right? They'll say, oh yeah, and by the way, this is great. And you're like, that's when you say you take that and then you kind of curve it round and you say, yeah, great, no problem, good idea. I'm going to put that here. And you can't really ignore that because now it exists. Now it's a card and now it's a task. And best they can do is delete the task, but then they've done an action, right? Then they've explicitly counteracted what you're doing, and people won't really do that. That's a bad actor, and then that's actually a really big warning sign where you say, hang on a second, you don't get to delete tasks that you've explicitly asked for because then I don't do them, you know? So I think that's the easier way.
What about you two? How do you deal with clients that do not understand out of scope tasks?
I would first start with like repositioning what I'm saying. Sometimes you always think that you're clearly communicating, and sometimes you're just not, right? And I try to tackle a problem multiple ways before, and usually there's always one or two or three ways to get to a client. And usually I would say if I've done it 3 times and the client finally understands and they see my perspective, that's great. And then sometime after that, you just know that they're a difficult client, right? And then that's a different kind of navigation when you do that. But I give them the opportunity to say, hey, it could be just me. And I could be using too many technical terms, and I need to boil it down to some simple basics, or maybe use an analogy or something else, and really try to approach it from their technical level or their skill set.
For us, it's a bit different. Like this, at the beginning of this year, we tested a new thing, which quite well for the moment. When we encounter a client, we ask him or her for the ideal launch date. Like, what is the ideal date you want to be online? And we make kind of retro planning of what you need to validate at those precise dates to be online at the date you want. And if it's not validated, of course, you will not be online. So we use this as a kind of a stress for the client to say, okay, they work fast, but I need also to invest at the same pace to validate things and make things evolve over time. Every day I validate things, and every day I know what is going to happen. But I think it's also a question of saying no. Like, majority of people I encounter don't know how to say no directly. It's not 1, 2, or 3 times, it's just no now. And that's why I say you are very patient, I think, too, because me, it's not 3 times the explanation in different ways to explain someone he is not right. Like, you signed for something, you know exactly what you signed, you have the contract to remember it for you, if you need it. So after all, it's quite easy for me. It's like, you ask it or not. If you don't ask it, don't ask me to do this at the end. If you want to make it after, we can make a quotation after the project launch and not delaying everyone's work, because you are the client right now, but in 1 month, we take another new build. So I'm not going to discuss with you all day long by WhatsApp or by SMS. So it's just a question of how you want to say no and how you are strict with that no, or if you are, oh, yeah, okay, we are going to help you. Like, okay, let's call me tomorrow, we find a solution to make it happen. But you are just taking the problem to put this on your team and not just by not saying no.
I think the big difference, though, it's a very different approach, right? And the reason why that's different is that it's about the type of project you've got, yeah?
Exactly.
Like, you're talking about a project, and you need to clean that project so that you can start the next one.
Exactly.
Whereas we have a different model, or I have a very different model, is that a huge majority of our clients have ongoing relationships, and they want that. So if you need to finish cleanly, then you have to be extremely clear in what you want. Whereas with us, we need to establish a standard of working, because it's going to happen. It's going to keep happening. So we need to train them rather than stop them. So I think that's the key difference in the two approaches. Yeah.
Yes, but you can also educate the client and explain him that there are ways to work, and you are just his external team, but he can consider you as his team, and his own team can make 3 things at the same time, or everything they are going to make is shit. Like, it's either you make 1 thing at a time and it's perfect, or you make 3 things and it's nothing. So you end up, you make it again and again and again and again, and it's never finished. even if I was making retainer on very long relationships, I think I would prefer to say, okay, let's track all the tasks in Asana or ClickUp or Trello or whatever platform you use, and then come back when the project is launched to say, okay, you want to make this, what's the urgency of your request? What is really necessary and what is not? Because a lot of the time, requests are not necessary at all. It's like, I want to make this, but they forget about anything else they asked at the beginning 6 months ago. And I think it helps you prioritize what your teams need to focus on and what can come after and can be treated with more pace and more calm. And no need to hurry up to make something very quick and produce shit at the end for me.
It's a good point about how different the approach is going to be depending on the type of project and even the size of the project. There are still a number of questions in here, but we've just run out of time. So for anyone that didn't have a question answered, definitely come and find us. Like the panel and myself will be around here the rest of the day. And for further education, please definitely check out the Project Management Fundamentals course that's part of the Shopify Partner Academy. Lots of these topics are covered in that course. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you being here with us today.